Hello, everyone. This is AK Namul Haq from Dhaka, and I am with my friend Philip Shah. He is from Canada. We missed probably an episode because I must say to my viewers that Phil was sick. He had a heart attack, and he has recovered. So we're very happy that we are back. And this last episode, we discussed about the war in Ukraine and Russia, between the Ukraine and Russia, and we had thought that the war will be in trouble. But we also hope the war would have finished, but doesn't look like this is going to finish very soon. So with that introduction, let me go back to Phil and see his opinion on the war.
Thank you very much, Anamol. And yes, unfortunately, on July 6th, I suffered a massive heart attack. But since then, getting stronger every day and hoping for good things. So that gives another thing Dr. Haq and I have had in common over the years. But feeling better now. And of course, a lot of time has passed since we've commented on the war between Russia and Ukraine. And here we are so many months out from when it started last February. And we're seeing all kinds of issues that are going on in different parts of the world of the world. Like, for instance, initially in the genre I write a lot about, it's agricultural economics. In the grain trade, many people were worried about the lack of movement of grain coming out of Ukraine and Russia, because a lot of this grain went into North Africa and East Africa and places like that, where families and African people feel a lot of food insecurity if that grain hadn't reached their shores. And there was an agreement with Turkey and Russia and Ukraine to get some of this grain out. It's still hand to mouth, but at least there's some movement in it. And of course, we're still talking about a hot war zone. So it's hard to say how that's going to affect things. And of course, with that, we got inflation coming out of the war. We got a lower GDP globally, and the Russian economy is shrinking and the global economy is shrunken. And this is never a good thing, for people as a whole. But you know, we've talked about the many sides of issues in East-West over the years, and we've talked about how different parts of the world view these things differently. Where I'm from in North America, it's dominated by our American friends here, and Canada has been very stringent in going along with the U.S. And people in South America, Brazil, for instance, has one of the largest agricultural producers in the world, is ramping up to increase production, agricultural production, at the expense of Ukraine and other countries, and to help feed the world. And of course, in Asia, where Enamol's from, India and Bangladesh and other countries are trying to live their best life and try to deal with their country's economic growth at a time when the Americans and the West are putting pressure on them not to deal with Russia. And at the same time, places like India and Bangladesh and other places in Asia are trying to deal with their own problems while trying to mollify trade partners, whether that be the Chinese or whether that be the United States. I even read a commentary about the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who talked about, it might be easy for the West to boycott Russia, but why should Bangladesh be poorer by doing the same thing? The view from Asia is completely different than the view from other parts of the world, and I understood that. And I'm sure many of the same views are along those lines in other countries in Asia, as well as Africa and the Pacific and other places. So, our earlier commentary, we had talked about, we hope this doesn't happen. We hope, but of course it did happen. And the war doesn't seem to be a short one. It seems to be a long one. And we've seen the global economy affected by it. We've seen a contraction of the global economy, and that's a bad thing. But regionally around the world, in places like Asia and East Asia, South Asia, Africa, there's certainly a different view than simply boycotting Russia. So I'll throw it over to Dr. Haq to take it from there.
Thank you, Phil. I think you have laid this canvas well. It is true. I think the world is probably going through a transition. Probably this is not what we expected, but this has happened because of the war. The global world has been trying to cope up with this war. And I think we are seeing a big change in the whole global trade and production relations, the way I see it. Just to start with this idea that, first of all, you mentioned about Bangladesh Prime Minister said, Indian State Foreign Minister was also very similar. His statement was, if you look into the global problem, if it is your problem is my problem and my problem is not your problem, this is not good for the world. So kind of a state, the kind of a statement that tells you the how apart we are from each other. In other words, you look at your problem, but you have to look at the biggest problem that is Asian Africans are doing, which is their food problem. While the Western world is mostly looking at not as a food problem, but looking at a oil and energy problem, the crisis in Asia is more of a food. So that is where I think one good thing they have done so far is the agreement between Russia and Ukraine on the release of the grain supplies from Ukraine, and Ukraine is a major supplier. My worry on that front is that this is only this year, but next, this is the production of last year. This year, I'm not sure whether Ukraine is ready for that much production. So the problem is not over because one of the largest wheat producer probably in war, and if they are not producing the wheat this year, then the next year will be even troublesome for the whole world. So that is where I see one issue. The second issue, given this, I think the political front was the West expected everyone to beat up the drum with them. That did not happen. And we have mentioned that even if you look into the UN Security Council voting, I was honestly surprised when all three countries in Asia did not vote on that resolution to condemn Russian invasion. Why am I surprised? Because these three countries are not friends. UAE, which is a member of the UN Security Council, is mostly a friend of US. If you look at India, which is mostly a friend of Russia and anti-China, whereas in Chinese, which are there, all three voted did not vote to condemn Russian invasion. And that is the beginning of a shift in, I would say, thinking process. I think world should notice. That is one. The second thing that has happened, which that as the Bangladesh, for example, was pushed to say, look, do not do trade with Russia. The problem that we have a big nuclear power station coming. It is with the Russian aid. So government has a hard time how to pay back, how to pay from receive money and to pay also Russians on that. So that crisis itself led to certain other changes. And the changes that I see is and also the exclusion of Russia from the SWIFT currency exchange network is a big trouble for many of these countries. So countries like India has already agreed on currency swap, trading with Russia without dollars. China has already started that trading with Russia, again using currency swap with rubles and yuan. Bangladesh is also now contemplating of doing exactly the same thing. So there are bigger countries, and these are big countries. I'm pretty sure this will be happening in Southeast Asia. These are large economies. And this is also going to affect the global world because the de facto global currency was dollar. Saudi Arabia has already agreed with the Chinese not to deal with dollars in selling oil to to Chinese. So that is another big. I can see the currency world is going to be probably will have a bipolar currency world if it is not multipolar. And that is also going to affect many countries because it's not easy to deal with this. We are in a bigger trouble because our buyers are Western Europe, our Americans, Canadians are our biggest export partner. And our biggest import partner is China and India. So if you look carefully between these lines, we we have to deal with both dollar as well as other currencies. That is one. So that is something that I can see the global world has to grapple with. And I don't see, I'm pretty sure you would agree that the war is not going to end very soon. And if the war does not end very soon, and if the production of grain in Ukraine is not coming back, next year will be even bigger trouble for the food production globally, unless what you say that Brazil is going to compensate for it. I doubt it whether Brazil can compensate that much in 1 year. So if inflation is high, as we already know, Europe is experiencing inflation that probably we used to experience, we in Asia used to experience. Europe has never experienced inflation above 4-5%. That was the, whereas now it is almost near the double digit. England, UK is now 13%. So that is a high inflation. And with fuel price up, and I think that is something to me when I look into this, the global consequence of war is going to be too high. And I think that is something that we should start thinking about it, because the way the boycott worked, the way the passion for the war and anti-war has been pushing, I think that itself is, we need some people to think carefully between the line and say, look, what are we doing? Can you find a way to reduce the probably rhetorics and come to a sense that the consequence of the war is going to be too high on all parties involved?
I would hope that would happen, but it's difficult to know. It's unlikely, right? Like the way NATO is very strong with trying to resist whatever the Russians are doing, and the Russians are about the same. And I've always, we're talking about all these different things, but I made the statement, we talked about a long time, the last 20 years, maybe, about globalization, where we'll just, with our economies, we'll just make it work by getting parts from China to build things that we get the other components from Bangladesh and the other components from Brazil and Europe, and we all put them together and everybody's happy. But unfortunately, the way I'm looking at this right now is, to some extent, I'm saying that the concept of globalization is dead for the moment. I think simply because we've had a rupture. And just before this, we had a rupture with COVID supply restraints. And just look at what's still going on in East Asia with China with COVID-related problems and places like that. So the war just made it worse. So that is what it is. And I would hope that peace would break out and everybody would be getting along again. But trust has been broken. Trust has been broken. Just think of the Ukrainians and the Russians about trust. I was reading about a counteroffensive today that's going on. Ukrainians are trying to capture the southern region again. So it's a very difficult thing. And the things that you talk about, currency swaps and things of that nature, I'd really never ever, that's something that when you live on this side of the world, that's hard to imagine. But when you live on your side of the world, it's very practical to think about.
Yes, I think what is happening is that everyone is trying to accommodate things. That's what and the countries like Asian countries, which are mostly linked with the Western world, I must say. But East Asians are also very much linked with Chinese economy. Remember, Chinese is a huge economy. And such a big economy needs to be fed with food and also with everything else. So it's such a big economy. If you think about the export to Chinese economy, if you look carefully, the China has recently given Bangladesh almost every product tax-free entry. And they are trying to accommodate some of these countries, export products. So if there is a problem in the world, every country is going to, probably save their own back, and they're trying, and that's what they are trying. So I can see the narratives that is happening, and the biggest trouble that I see is the narratives are not going through properly. What I mean that the media that you are watching probably has one set of narratives. And the media that we watch from here is a completely different set of narratives. And that kind of a narrative itself is troublesome, because that means there is no negotiating positions. Everybody is trying to bully each other and trying to sort it out. But that kind of a attitude, to me, is going to cost lots of lives. It's going to cost. I'm more worried about the position of the euro, because Europe is in the center of the conflict. And if things goes bad, if you think about another way, if you look at in a different way, the war has increased the trade of military, warfare machineries and guns and everything else. So who are the biggest gainers? If you look at it previously in any war, US probably is one of the largest gainers. But nowadays, there are also Iranians are selling drones, the Turkish are selling drones, Chinese are selling things. So in other words, you can see multiple gainers are coming out of the war, despite the fact that common people across the world, everyone is suffering. So I think common people in Russia, common people in Europe, in Asia, they are all the victims of the war. But the people who are pushing it and the narratives around is not in favor of what you call stop the war. And that kind of a movement, as of now, I don't see it in the Western world. You know better than me. It does not exist. So
and the pressure is just going to build as it gets colder in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yes.
Germany relies so much on Russian gas to keep the lights on and keep warm. So the pressure is likely to increase.
And also on the top of it, you look into the drought this year. That has built up another pressure on everyone else. Today's news, Norwegians are reluctant to sell electricity to some of the European neighbors, and that's also building up pressure within them. So what I see, a trouble for the whole world, and I do hope that everyone, the citizens around the world, do come up with a prudent strategy and say, look, here is how we resolve it. Otherwise, we are heading towards almost like a disaster.
Well, you would hope that the leaders of the United States, China, and Russia, and maybe you could throw India in there too, you would hope that there would be some common ground that they could reach. But I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult the way it looks now.
Okay, Phil, I think this is our episode for today. We will meet again next month, and we'll hope to give a better world. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anil. Thank you very much.